Are you thinking of taking a leap and stepping outside your comfort zone in pursuit of a new job or a new educational path? Then you will not want to miss my conversation with Brooke Wheeler. Brooke's journey reminds us of the importance of listening to our ancestors, seeking education, and being open to new opportunities. Her transformation from a young girl with a passion for sewing to a successful environmental educator for youth showcases how following your passion can lead you to unexpected places, such as working on the sets of major movies. But despite her success, Brooke never lost sight of her values and stayed true to her roots. Get ready to be inspired as Brooke shares her personal story, including the highs and lows she faced on her way to becoming an environmental educator for youth at the Bureau of Land Management. With her passion for giving back to the community, this conversation is sure to resonate with anyone who values making a difference in the world around them. And now, let's have Brooke introduce herself.
Well, first, I have to introduce myself as every Navajo has to introduce themselves as it is customary. And we were taught from a very young age, get out there and introduce yourself in your language. So, Brooke Wheeler-Nez, Kinyaa'áanii nishle do ipo bachichin kanisakni dashiche do ipo dashina. So basically, I just introduced myself and my clan. So I am maternal side is Tower House, and paternal side is Tangle clan. I'm also of the Ipo people in Nigeria. So I am both Indigenous. So it's really cool to be able to be in the position that I am in today. I work for the Bureau of Land Management, and that is a federal agency under the Department of Interior. So we manage 240 million acres of public land, and I put that in quotation marks, public land. And in my role, I work here in Arizona and Phoenix, and I am the state youth, environmental education, and volunteer lead. I also take on the partnership and interpretation roles as well. So basically what I do is the policies or the laws that are passed by Congress for those programs, I go ahead and help create policy that is implemented on the field for our offices to go ahead and utilize when they are working with the public and managing public lands and volunteers. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and my job, but I also want to kind of talk about where I'm from. I am from Tuba City, Arizona. Tunanasteze, and if there's any Navajos listening, hi, I'm from Tuba City. And so I grew up in Tuba. Well, I'm an Army brat or Air Force brat, and I traveled around with my family for the good portion of my life. But then my father retired, and then we went back to my mom's home place, which is on the Navajo reservation in Tuba City. So that's where I lived around junior high up to high school, and I graduated there from Tuba Public High. And I never, ever, ever thought that I would be where I am today. I was very much a res bunny, as they say, and I just wanted to stay home and kick it with my cousins. And yeah, I just never thought I'd be in this place and space that I'm at today.
Yeah, that's so interesting that, the role that you have and where you started. And like you say, you couldn't imagine you getting there, but you did, right? What did that path look like? Because let's say that somebody that is interested in maybe following the footsteps of your career, how would you say that your story played out, and then maybe things that kind of help you along the way?
Oh, wow. Like I said, I just could not imagine being here. I didn't even know that the position that I'm in actually exists. And honestly, when I was in high school on the res, I had no idea what the Department of Interior was. I had no idea that there were federal agencies managing these mass amounts of public lands. And so if I look back on today, I'd just be back in the day, I'd be just like, wow. So I guess my journey here is full of ups and downs. I didn't set out to come here. I wasn't one of those people like my sister. She's like, I want to be a nuclear engineer. And she did it. For me, it was a completely different course of action. I ended up, after I graduated from high school, kind of just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. My mom was a huge influence in my life. She was very adamant that we go to college because my mom went to college. My mom is Navajo. And so she was in the boarding school system. She was also on the LDS placement program. And her father told her that she should go get an education. And that's why he sent his kids off to boarding school in the public schools in Utah on the placement program. And that was instilled into my mother, that importance of education. So every single day of my life, I heard, you're going to go either to the military or you're going to either go to college. And I chose college, luckily, but I really had no clue what I wanted to do. And I was the worst student. I seriously C's and D's through middle school, through high school, because I'm neurodivergent. So I have ADD. And I didn't really understand what was going on with my brain and why I could not focus and I could not, settle down. So I really struggled with school. And so by the time I graduated, I had no plan whatsoever. I kind of fell into a group of kids that, all we were doing was hanging out, cruising on the weekends. I had a boyfriend, all that life. And so when I was in high school, I also was involved in band and theater gave me the opportunity to learn how to develop a talent that my mom taught me, which was to sew. So since my mom knew how to sew, everyone knew that my mom knew how to sew. They said, Brooke, you're going to be costumes in theater. So I ended up doing all the costumes in theater, and I got a scholarship. I actually got several scholarships to go to U of A, where I ended up going. And it was just like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I got the scholarship. Okay, I'm going to go do it. And I will tell you, that was the scariest thing I've ever done. One of the scariest things I've ever done in my life is to leave my home and go to college, because that's all I knew was the res. My whole family was there. My friends were there. I mean, a lot of my friends stayed on the reservation. They're still there and they're living their lives and what have you. But for me to go away from that place of security of my family and my homeland was, I can't even describe it. It just felt like a baby being ripped out from their mother. And so I ended up going to U of A, having no clue what the heck I was doing, and ended up dropping out the first year. And I think that's that's one of the issues that Indigenous students face today, is going to college off the res, and then, being bombarded with this whole new culture that, and faces that don't look like them, and not having that security and those resources that they did back at home. And so, what do you expect to happen? And so back in that day, U of A didn't have a robust American Indian Student Center as they do now. But I really suffered that first year, and I flunked out bad. And so that kind of just led me down a trajectory of just like, what am I doing with my life? I ended up going back to the res, and just feeling like an absolute failure, because everybody was just like, yay, Brooke's going to do something. We never thought she would achieve anything, but, and then here I come back a year later, and I'm like, well, I guess you're right. Yeah, I just felt like a failure. And on top of that, I was pregnant at the same time. So I was kicked out of school. I wasn't kicked out of school. I flunked out of school, and I was pregnant at the same time. And I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I just felt like, okay, I guess I'm staying on the res. And, a lot of my friends had kids out of high school or in high school. And I was like, I guess this is going to be my life from now on. It's just, selling stuff at my mom's store, or, trying to find a job at Bash's'. Just looking back on it, I'm just like, wow. I was in a really tough place there. And as you can see, back then I had no clue where I would end up now. But that that message my mother taught me and my grandfather reiterated was, you have to go to college. You have to go to college. You have to get an education. That is the only way you're going to, help your people, because that's a huge value of mine that we're brought up to, do, is just to go back and help our communities, and to also uplift myself, but also uplift my child, my son. So I stayed on the res for a couple of years. I worked as much as I could, but I also decided to go to Diné College, which is a tribal college there on the Navajo reservation. Still had no idea what I was doing with my life, but still listening to those voices of getting an education. It wasn't easy because my mother went to college way back in the day, and she had back then they didn't have FAFSA. They didn't have that financial aid. They didn't have all those scholarships. I have no idea how she went to school, but school is definitely cheaper for her than it was for me. And I had to do all that navigating by myself. I had to learn about the financial aid system. I had to learn about writing scholarships. I mean, I started from ground zero. I was spending, I had my son with me, and I would go to the Tuba City Library and check out big books on scholarships and try to read, how to get scholarships, how to get grants for school, and how to succeed in college, because obviously I flunked and I was having a hard time in school. And so I was taking these courses at Diné College, just my general education courses. And on top of that, I was, doing all the scholarship work and what have you. And I ended up moving to Phoenix with my sister, because I had just finished all my courses at Diné College and I had nowhere else to go. And so I just said, you know what? My sister graduated from high school. I'm going to piggyback on you. I called her. I was like, hey, we're coming down. Make room for us in her little tiny apartment as she was going to ASU. And me and my son just worked. I mean, I worked, and, had my son in childcare, and took classes when I could at Mesa Community College, where I ended up getting a degree in general education once again. And this is where my life, I was still on this trajectory where I have no clue what I'm doing, but still that voice, get an education. And this is where things kind of took off. Since I knew how to sew, and since I had a background in costumes way back in the day, I started working for the theater there in Mesa Community College. And I got to meet a lot of people in the theater industry. And one of my teachers, who is so influential, I can't, Mr. Barnes, he was so influential in my life that he told me that I could do anything that I ever wanted. And this was something different than what I heard growing up. It's like, you're going to college, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to do something that, you can go ahead and come back to the res and get a job. And he was the one who said to me, whatever you're going to do, you can go ahead and use those skills and those tools in order to uplift your community. And that was groundbreaking for me. And so I really had an interest, and this was the first time that I started to explore interests that I was interested in, instead of interests that somebody else was interested, that would, like the doctor and engineer, because I was not doing well in those courses. And so Mr. Barnes said to me, I think you have a talent for film, because you're right. You really, really get engaged with when we talk about film and media, especially when it comes to Indigenous people and the representation of Indigenous people in film. And because I was always arguing with people in class, like, that's racist. Why is Dustin Hoffman wearing that red paint? And I was really going to town and arguing with people about the importance of Indigenous people representing and telling their own stories. So Mr. Barnes said, there's this film school over at Scottsdale Community College. Maybe you should think about going over there, and maybe that's your path. So I did. I enrolled that next semester. I went to Scottsdale Community College, where I ended up finally graduating after being in like community college forever. Ended up graduating with my associates in sciences and film studies. And while I was doing all of this, I was working in theater. So I was still doing costumes. And also I got into film. A lot of the people I went to school with, they were working in film. And so they needed someone who was doing costumes and who knew how to sew. And I kind of got ushered into this whole world of film and costumes and theater. And before you know it, while I was going to school, I was also doing this other work on the side. So I got called to work on films like Terminator and The Surrogates and all sorts of, Transformers and all sorts of films. And this path is not going where I am today. And it's so weird. Anyways, so I started working in film and theater, and I liked what I was doing, but I didn't feel like it was my purpose in life. It felt like, well, I still need to give back to my community. And how is this giving back to my community? And so my son was growing up, and I was trying to navigate my career in film and theater, working wherever I could. I was always gone a lot. I had relatives and my son's father watching Ethan, my son. So I had to make a decision. I'm like, I need to be doing something that resonates with me. And this is fun. This is cool. Yeah, you have an IMDb, whatever, but I need to do something that is for my people. And also another turning point was that movie, that one with Johnny Depp, and he won
The Lone Ranger.
The Lone Ranger. Yes. So this is at the time where that movie came out, and it was being filmed on the Navajo Res. And I was asked to work on that film. And I did not feel okay with that. This was a time when I was being asked consistently to be working on films that were about the stereotypical in Hollywood Indian, if you will. And I refused to do those films. I refused to work on them in costumes or in any shape or form. And so when that movie came about, and I said, absolutely no. The girl I was working with, who sponsored me, said to me, "You're not going to work ever again if you turn down this film, because it's so huge." And I said, I refuse. I will not work on this that I feel like in my soul is against my Indigenous values. So after that, I didn't get a lot of work. And I was fine with that, because I stayed true to who I was. And that gave me the opportunity to go back to school.
That little voice, right? That you had, get education. That voice came back, right?
Right. That voice, get an education. I swear that voice was not only my grandfather, but was my ancestors. It just, get an education. And I went back to school. I ended up getting my anthropology degree and Indigenous studies degree at ASU. I was very interested in culture. I was very interested in the human condition. I was very interested in what makes humans humans. And it was the major that was made for me, because I felt I found my passion. I had the American Indian Studies courses that gave me the opportunity to learn more about Indian policy, Indian law, and Indigenous history around the world. I had no clue about some of the things like the Marshall Trilogy, no clue about that. They don't teach you those Supreme Court cases in high school. They don't tell you that you are wards of the federal government, and that we have quasi-sovereignty. They never teach you that stuff. So this was the first time my mind was being expanded. And I'm like, whoa. So this is why we had the Bennett freeze. So this is why we don't have running water and electricity. This is why we have dirt roads, and this is why we don't have taxes that come back to our, communities. They go somewhere else. I I learned all this stuff and it opened my eyes incredibly. And I decided that right then and there, my focus was to be integrated in some sort of public administration or what have you, or museums, or because the anthropology portion, because I wanted to help rewrite the narrative. I also wanted to help change people's perspectives of Indigenous people, and also wanted to help in public policy. So I was still all over the place. And I decided that every summer of my undergrad, I was going to do an internship. And this wasn't easy because I was still raising my son, and I was still, going to school. So I had to juggle both of those. And those were extremely difficult, and working at the same time. I was working a full-time job at the Salt River Elementary School there on the Maricopa Salt River Indian community. So I was doing all this stuff at the same time. And I was very fortunate that my job at Salt River allowed me to have summers off. It also allowed me to have flexibility to go to school in the night, in the evening. And it also gave me the opportunity to, see my son more often. And so every summer I took an internship, and I was very fortunate to find internships that paid for everything. So there are internships out there, especially for Indigenous youth and Indigenous students, to have their boarding, their travel, to get paid a stipend, all of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so there are still opportunities like that out there. I was able to get a lot of internships every summer with the federal government. I got an internship with the National Archives, where I was opened up to the world of Indigenous participation in the creation of America. I mean, I actually got to hold treaties. I actually got to hold, important documents and policies that changed the face of Indian country. I also got to see president executive orders of the removal of Indigenous people off of their lands. So I was able to work in that area, and then also bring attention to a lot of the things that Indigenous people have been doing in America, such as the expeditions to the North Pole. Indigenous people have been at the North Pole since time immemorial, but yet, white settlers have been, racing up to the North Pole, and their stories are being told. But then our stories weren't. So I was able to help tell those narratives of the people, Indigenous peoples of that era, in my internships. I also had an internship with the BIA, where I worked with the Office of Self-Governance. Sherry, she's one of my mentors. With the Office of Self-Governance, I learned more about the tribes' relationships with the BIA, that painful history, but also the changes that are happening, the changes that still need to happen. I also worked for other federal agencies, and I got to work for the Smithsonian, the National Museum of the American Indian, where it was literally my playground. I was able to, help on exhibits. I was able to help on education initiatives. I was able to sit down with tribal elders and tribal members as they told their stories that were later going to be incorporated into the museum. I got to hold collections, material culture, as they call it, but, sacred objects that hold such significance to the tribes that NAMI, as it's called, the museum, holds on to and helps preserve. And so all of these experiences, man, they helped me become the person that I am. All these internships and my education kind of shepherded me. It was just kind of like this guy. It was slowly guiding me to where I needed to be today and the work that I'm doing today. And then Obama got elected. And this was a huge another turning point in my career, because when I saw him elected and my son was with me, my son was about 10 years old, and he jumped up as soon as they called it, Obama was elected, yay! And he collected all these Obama cards and everything. And Obama really inspired me to be a part of change. And I just graduated, And I was like, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to do? I have all this knowledge, all this experience. What am I going to do with it? And then Obama got elected. And then I decided I'm going to go into public administration. I'm going to get my master's. I'm going to go into public policy. This is what I'm going to do. And so I did. And let me tell you, it was difficult. None of this stuff happened. It was very easy. I'm telling you, I struggled. My son and I were eating ramen and hot dogs. I mean, it was a tough life as I was trying to figure out what I was trying to do and trying to encourage myself as I'm getting my education and finding my role, and then also encouraging my son, instilling in him the same thing that was taught to me: get an education, get an education. And I ended up going to ASU again, getting my master's in public administration and also another master's in nonprofit management. And again, doing internships. I worked at the Maricopa County Treasurer's Office. I did records management for them. I ended up working for the town of Gilbert here, doing other public policy sort of things. I ended up working at the Arizona State Capitol for the House of Representatives for the Democratic Party. And I learned so much through them. I worked in the area of natural resources and environmentalism. And that was, you can kind of see the path now. That was my introduction into my career today. And it was my work with the House of Representatives that I got to meet tribal members, bigwig governors and presidents. I got to sit down with some very influential people in Indigenous environmental advocacy groups. I got to work with Albert Hale, who was a member of the House of Representatives at that time. And he actually came to my graduation. That was so special for me. And so I ended up graduating, and I applied for an internship through the Bureau of Land Management. And I didn't think I had a shot. I mean, the description was, you had to have such and such experience working in natural resources. You had to have a degree in recreation. You had to have all these criteria. And I just said, I'm just going to apply. We'll see what happens. And I'm like, I have nothing else to lose. I'm graduating, so let's just do this. And then I got a call. Saying, hey, we'd like to interview you for this position to work with the director of the BLM in Washington, D.C. And I ended up getting the job. To work as an intern there at the BLM for Neil Cornsey as an intern with the Washington office. And that summer, I just dove deep into natural resource policy and environmentalism. I already had a little bit of knowledge. I had a whole bunch of knowledge on Indian policy and law, but I was able to integrate that into this new field of natural resource environmental, laws and policies. So I learned a lot there. And this internship that I have, and I'm actually now, I help promote this internship program. The direct hire program has a direct hiring status after it. So when you complete your summer internship, you are able to be directly hired into the federal government. And if you know anything about the federal government and jobs, it's so hard to get in. But this allows students to get their foot in the door to be directly appointed to a position. And I was entering the end of my internship, and I had no job. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go home. I have student loans and I have a kid to feed. What am I going to do? And I saw the BLM director, Ray Suazo, walk across the hall. He was going to see Neil Cornsey there in Washington, D.C. I ran so fast because, I'm from Arizona, and I saw Ray, and I was like, Ray, hi, I'm Brooke Wheeler. And please know I'm an introvert. So that was really difficult for me, but everything was on the line. So he stopped and I shook his hand, and I'm like, I'm Brooke Wheeler. I just graduated. I'm from Arizona. I'm Indigenous. This is what I'm about. Can we have a cup of coffee? And he's like, yeah, after he was kind of taken back, and he's like, okay, sure. After my meeting with Neil. So after his meeting with Neil, we went down to the Department of Interior cafeteria and had some coffee, and man, was I nervous. This was my shot. So I basically spewed out my resume. I told him about all my expertise in sustainability, environmentalism, American Indian policy, what have you. And then he just listened to me. And I told him what my values were. I told him what I was about. And I told him that it's very important for me as an Indigenous person to have a position that I'm able to work with my people and also help my people at the same time. And so he's like, okay, I think I have a position for you. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we have this initiative, a sustainability initiative, and it works directly with with youth. So you could be working with Native youth, volunteers, and environmental education. And I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, actually this position just opened up. We haven't put it on the street yet, but yeah, I think you'd be perfect for it. He's like, send me your resume. And I did. And he's like, yeah, you're perfect for it. And within 6 weeks, I was hired as the BLM state youth lead, youth, environmental education, and volunteerism lead.
Wow, that's amazing. What's the story?
Yeah, isn't that a ride from a res bunny to where I am now, working in film with directors and actors and producers, to working in government with the same kind of type of people, it seems like. But yeah, I felt like I was being guided to the place where I am now. And all of the things that I do in my position are things that I help Indigenous students with. So finding them internship opportunities, finding them resources for scholarships. I do that on the side, but resources for scholarships, how to write scholarships, because one thing about me is I'm very resourceful. My whole school education cost about $220,000 from undergrad to graduate school. I ended up raising $190,000 of that through scholarships. So I help students write scholarships, essays and internship essays. And I also help Indigenous students try to, mentor them. If they're interested in archaeology, I hook them up with archaeologists. If they're interested in, public law, I hook them up with our solicitors. That's what I do in my position. I love the position that I'm in right now. I get to work with, NICALC, and through that, I got to meet you through Unity. And I got to meet some of the Unity students, especially Stephen. Shout out to Stephen if he hears this, because I love him. And just working with Indigenous youth, it fulfills that core value of mine of giving back to my community. And they inspire me 100%. Every single time I get to interact with students and talk about the many programs that we have, or internships or what have you, they inspire me to get back up there and keep doing the work that I'm doing. Because it's not easy being the only Indigenous Native American youth lead in the history of BLM. It's not easy, being in a division. And I love all my coworkers. My coworkers are amazing, but I am the only Native American there. And it's not easy. If I had $1 for every time I had a say in a meeting, what about Indian country? What about the Indigenous populations? I'd be rich. So that's my story.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and it's so inspiring, and hopefully a lot of people will listen to it and see that they too can achieve things. And let me ask you, have you ever thought about writing a book about your story?
No.
No? Well, if you ever do, I want you to come back on the podcast and talk about your book. First place, okay?
What?
Yeah, I think it would be a great book. So if you ever decide to write one, we'd be happy to support you here on the podcast.
Oh, wow. Well, first I'm going to have to check with Oprah. And then yeah, and I think that is something that I do in my position. And my side hustle, which is not really a hustle. I just help students get into college. Is that what I pass down is what Mr. Barnes told me. You can be anything that you want to be. I had no clue about like I said, the Department of Interior, these positions in natural resources. And it's so important for Indigenous youth to be involved in this movement, because Indigenous people have been, as we said before, the stewards of this land since time immemorial. And we should be at the forefront of the solutions for climate change. We need to be at the table, because we built the table. Okay. So I'm always empowering Indigenous youth that we need to be out there. Our voices need to be heard. And it's very difficult. It is very difficult, especially when you're just used to, working around with your family or your friends. And it's a whole different world when you're working with non-Indigenous peoples. And those are skills that I really feel that, it's skills that you really have to kind of learn. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. I even have sometimes hard time transitioning between, going for my family, and then I have to go back to work, and then it's 2 different languages.
Yeah. Code switch, I think it's called.
Yeah, code switching. Yeah. And it is difficult, but it's worth it. And I just want to say that you can do anything that you put your mind to. There are resources out there, and most importantly, you have ancestors behind you. You have ancestors who are rooting for you. And I really feel like my ancestors, really guided me to where I am today. I feel their presence always, whether it's, when I'm sitting by the fire or when I'm talking to elders in my positions or what have you, I feel their presence. And even when I was at my lowest, when, I had papers due, I had no food on the table, my rent was due, and I was just praying to ancestors, please, 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 please help guide me, please. They were there for me. And I'm beautiful. Just so very thankful.
That's very beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that with us.
No problem.
And it makes me wonder, and this might be kind of coming from left field, but when you were sewing those costumes, is there one that you were proud of, like a costume that you made that you remember the most from your history of sewing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We did a Shakespearean play, Much Ado About Nothing. And I had to learn to make a Renaissance gown for several of the casts. And one of them in particular was, I think, the love interest, started with a B. Can't remember her name. But it was a very beautiful gown, and I hand sewed pearls on there and lace. I learned how to make lace and everything. I was very proud of that dress. I wish I could have that dress. I have pictures of it. But that was one of those dresses that it was seriously Hollywood quality, I have to say.
Yeah. And that makes me think, because sometimes we have certain things that we like to do. Maybe we like to draw. Maybe we like to play an instrument. Maybe we like to do talks. In your case, sewing, like super random things that we do for fun, right? And when a situation comes where we need to progress in our life with school or career, and that one thing that you did that you didn't really pay attention to it comes back in a full force and open doors for you. I think that's such a phenomenal thing that as a youth, you don't pay attention to it. You're like, you know what? I just play the guitar for fun, right? And then one time comes, and then that thing that you do, it will propel you, right? So it's sometimes like, I think as Indigenous youth or youth from underserved communities, we try to find our place in the world, and we have that one thing that maybe makes us weird, maybe makes it different than other people, right? But then if we rely on that skill, rely on that done, we say in Spanish, done, a gift. We rely on that can propel us, right? And it's just really like listening to yourself and going in. I think your story is such a great example of that, of you enjoying sewing, and in a way sewing start opening doors for you, the film doors, and careers and scholarships and so much from sewing, right? Like it's just a needle to movies and to where you are now.
Well, that's the title of my book, From Needle to Movies. No, you're absolutely right. It was a skill that my grandmother had, that actually my grandmother made her own clothes. So my grandma Chubby, my grandma Caroline, who I'm named after my middle name, she never went to school. And so I believe the story was that when the BIA people came for her, that her mom hid her in a well, and so they kept coming, and she just stayed in the well until they left. And my grandmother never went to school, but she had to learn other skills to kind of, to bring money in for the family. So she learned, she sewed traditional outfits. She also weaved Navajo rugs that she sold at the trading post. And that skill of sewing was passed down to my mother, and my mother ended up using that skill to open up a fabric store and alteration business in Tuba City. And that I had no choice. I have to preference that. I had no choice about learning how to sew. That was already designated for me. My mom made sure that we didn't have any summers. We were staying in the store and we were sewing, traditional outfits and prom gowns and what have you. So that was definitely a skill that I never, ever thought would bring me money and, give me a sense of purpose, open up a whole community to me. And was really a lot of my bread and butter going through school. So yeah, you're right. Those skills, you never know. Even learning how to do laundry. I was doing the rich kids' laundry there at U of A just to make money. And they had no clue how to do their own laundry. So you never know what skills you have can be that side hustle.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioning the Earth ambassadors and Steve Harvey. Such an amazing person. And that's where we met, right? We met on a Unity conference. Can you tell a bit about that experience and leading to the Native Youth Climate Adaptation Leadership Congress? It's a lot of words.
Yeah, there's a lot of words. Trust me, I know. It's NICALC, as we call it. But just some background information. NICALC is a 1-week Congress in West Virginia. It's in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Conservation Training Center. And what the purpose and mission is to bring Indigenous youth, high school students, and college students to Shepherdstown for this 1 week, and to teach them leadership skills and other types of, integrating Indigenous knowledge with Western science in order to develop projects and solutions to address climate change in their communities. It's a long-winded thing, but they learned so much, and they put together projects. They also learn about working on the land. They learned about different environmental issues and what have you, and so I helped promote that for my position. BLM sponsors college students. So if you got any college students out there who are interested in coming to NICALC, you don't have to have a degree in environmentalism or sustainability, because every position is important to the livelihood of our communities. So if you're interested, let me know. But that's what got me to Unity. So a lot of people ask me, how do you work with Indigenous people? How do you build those trust and partnerships? Even for me, it's difficult. It takes time. And I've been trying to get my foot in the door with Unity for so long. And finally, after, 4 years, they invited me to the conference, and I was like, yay, we're in. And so with being able to connect with you and the Earth ambassadors, and a few of them applied. Steve was definitely one of them. It came to NICALC, And Steve and the junior faculty, the college students that we have to help mentor the high school students there, was just phenomenal. I cannot laud that kid enough. Brought about so many changes and ideas. And so NICALC is youth driven, and youth are important in this movement. And as I mentioned, to provide solutions for climate change. So Stephen was right there at the forefront, providing a lot of insight to our staff about how we can do better outreach, how we can partner with Indigenous youth. That kid's a leader. I'm telling you, he's a leader. He's going to be, I keep telling him he's going to be president one day, but that's how I was able to work with Unity and work with the amazing students there. I got to learn so much about the program. A lot of the things I learned just from that one conference, we are integrating into NICALC. I mean, I brought all these ideas. I'm like, look what Unity's doing. They're doing this. We need to do that. So I absolutely love Unity and the mission and what they're all about. And, anytime I can go to the conferences and meet other Unity members, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I love Unity too, because when you participate in the conference, you see the impact that Unity has on the life of Indigenous youth and how they find a place where they can feel safe, they can learn, they can be among like-minded people. And I feel like you're such a great resource to have, like you helping so many people across. And I was wondering, is there a place that people can connect with you if they want to see the things that you're posting? Because I know on LinkedIn, you're very active. I always see like some really cool posts that you have. What would you direct people to connect with you?
It would be my LinkedIn. It would be definitely my LinkedIn, because I put a lot of internships or opportunities, scholarships on my LinkedIn. And it's also an opportunity for people to connect with me, to learn about other federal internship programs in general. Through my work with Unity, I'm trying to build this, this thing of Indigenous youth just passionate about environmentalism. I know there's little groups out there, but just a huge cohort of youth that really want to drive this change, because it has to be the voices of the youth with the knowledge of our elders that is going to make a difference. And so if youth are out there who have this interest, especially right now, Indigenous, what they call Indigenous ecological knowledge, Western science calls it basically Indigenous knowing. Our traditional ways of knowing is huge right now. You got the Braiding Sweetgrass book. I can't remember what her name is. Wimmer, I think her name is. And she came out with a youth guide too for youth interested in incorporating Indigenous knowledge with science, and learning more about the world. But I really feel like there needs to be this reconnection of, Indigenous communities with our environment, and then advocacy with our Indigenous youth with elder knowledge. So if that's something you're interested, please hook me up, look me up on LinkedIn, because I feel like this is my passion and my calling.
Yes, thank you so much for talking to us. Such a great story. I feel like definitely people are going to be inspired by your career and knowing not to give up, to listen to the voice of the ancestors. And as we wrap up here, what would you say it would be an advice that you can give people from all over the world that want to leave the world a better place? What would you say that is one thing they can do, maybe even from home, something that they can start? Because sometimes it can be overwhelming to know, where do I start? How can I make the world better environmentally?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
You can read about it in my book. It really, for people around the world, or just people, Indigenous people in general, we have this knowledge locked in within us. This is knowledge that is passed down. It's a fire that is passed down to us that we might have forgotten, that needs to be awakened. And that that knowledge is something that we can all tap into to be better stewards of this environment, whether that is learning the place names of our traditional homelands, if that means learning our language, if that means learning our natural food types, if that means, learning our songs. I really feel like all of that is in part being stewards of our environment, because you can't take away the environment from culture. That's one thing I've learned. It is so integrated in all of it, even going out for a walk in some of our sacred spaces, because, our stories are held there. That is important. And passing that knowledge down, learning about it. And I know sometimes our elders, like my mother, because she was in the boarding school, and she didn't teach us our language, and she didn't teach us our culture. And I had to go out and find it. I had to go ask other people, and sometimes our elders don't want to talk about it. But being curious and going in with an open mind to just really explore who we are as Indigenous people, going out and looking at our landscapes in a different way with our stories. I think that's something that, we can all take with us and share with us. And in essence, it starts with us, change starts with us. And I think that's the first step, that if you want to make a better place in this world, you start with yourself, and you start by learning who you are and where you come from, and reconnecting with that portion of yourself.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Brooke. I really appreciate the time, the wisdom. This was a great episode. And remember, when you release your book, first place you're going to stop at is going to be our podcast to share with our audience. So thank you so much. Agoje.
Hagoshi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to our conversation with Brooke. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a pleasure having Brooke here, and it's heartwarming to know that her hard work has led her to a path of giving back to her community. Before you go, I have a small but very important favor to ask you. If you can spare a minute, could you please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts? This is a great way to support our show, and reading the reviews is a shot of motivation to me and the team. It would help us to continue producing this podcast. Thank you so much. Agoje.